Hello and welcome to Proudly We Serve, our program dedicated to veterans and informing the community about issues impacting on our veterans. Today, my co-host, Al Bledsoe. Al, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right. And our guest today is Duane Hodgin. Duane, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Pleased to be here. Thank you,
Ron. This program is, I think you'll find it interesting. Duane's done a lot of research and writings regarding military personnel, veterans and that. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that he has published. But Duane, first of all, let's tell us a little bit about Duane. Where you from and how'd you get here and all that?
Ron, I grew up in Richmond, Indiana, graduated in 1962, went on to college, started my career in high school in coaching at Marion, Indiana, then moved back here in 1979 to 89 where I was assistant superintendent. Okay. And then from here in 89 spent 25 years in a suburban school district in Indianapolis. And my wife is also a 1963 graduate of Richmond High School. So we moved back to be back home, and we have a granddaughter who's a sophomore at the high school, and our daughter and son-in-law here.
Okay. 1962.
I've seen most of the books that you've written, the World War II book, and here lately the Vietnam book. What really inspired you to do that? What was it about that you wanted to do?
I became interested in World War II back when I was younger because of my father, who served in World War II in the Pacific. And over the years, his story unfolded. Like so many veterans, they didn't either share their stories or over a period of time. And so I've always had an interest in World War II. And 5 years ago, a colleague and I, when I was in Indianapolis, wrote our first book. It was called World War II Duty on a Country, The Memories of Those Who Were There. And I went around Indiana and interviewed 80 World War II veterans. First one was my father at age 95, and he was the oldest. And he passed before the book was done, but he knew that that's what it was. And
his recall was good and all that?
Oh, yes, excellent. Right. And he was still telling me his story a few months before, he passed away.
What do you find with the World War II guys? What kind of stories do you hear from them? I've read some of the book.
There's so many things that stand out, Al. That's a very good question. I think the thing I saw so much in the World War II veterans was their sense of, initially before you and I got into Korea and Vietnam, that they came out of the Depression. Okay, they had a work ethic. They had a strong belief in what they were doing. The country was united behind them. They were proud of their service. They knew how critical their role was. And what I also found out is that so many of them, when I would ask to interview them, they would say, well, I really didn't do anything. They felt if they weren't in combat, they didn't serve. And what I tried to emphasize is, as one of the veterans told me, who was a Silver Star recipient, 2 Purple Hearts, he said, Duane, what percent served in combat? And I said 40. He said 17% in World War II. Wow. Don't forget 83% were behind the lines doing what it took so we could do our job.
That's right.
Well, I know some of them elderly guys, and it really, as I'm going to say a young person listening to some of their stories, we used to have a gentleman at the club, Fred Adelsberger, which I think you know Fred.
Yes, I know.
And Fred, you could just sit and listen to him tell stories all day about what he did, but he kept a diary, which I thought was kind of neat. I never did anything like that, but he could tell you the time and place where he was at, what he was doing, and all that, which really fascinated me. And what really intrigued me is, did you come to the World War II thing that was at the club? They had honored all the World War II guys last year, I think it was.
I was out of town then.
I think we had about 80 guys there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
and boy, some of the stories and their recall, and boy, their minds were sharp. I mean, I was really amazed at most of them being that 85 plus, but they were still sharp. You could answer questions, knew what they was there for, and it really surprised me.
But you know what for those guys, to me, what impressed me was their sense of duty, honor, and country. And I don't know, I don't think I see that as much in the current generation of military personnel. I hope I'm not offending anyone, but you know what I mean? That real sense, I mean, commitment to duty on the country. For those guys, World War II, those guys, when I talk to them, man, I mean, you can almost feel it, you know, when they talk about it.
Right. But you know, I've had the privilege, I say, and the opportunity in 5 years to interview almost 180 veterans from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. In the sense I get in interviewing all of those, and many of these men had never told their stories before, as we well know, but they opened up with a real genuine, you know, reflection of what it was to them, and to a person, I really sent that same sense of patriotism and dedication from that Korean veteran, the Vietnam veteran. They, you know, they did what they were told to do, and they tried to do it the best way they could do it. And I think that's true of all of our military. It was a different time in World War II.
Sure.
You know, our total freedom was at stake there.
And maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what I...
You know, one person one time told me, in fact, a gentleman that was in actually Iraq, Colonel Steve Russell, who has actually his forte is actually he's the person that captured Saddam Hussein. And he said the biggest difference is just a drafted military versus a volunteer force. You get a different attitude, you get a different demeanor altogether, because when you're drafted, you're going to go where else, buddy, but when you volunteer, it's a totally different scenario.
Were you in when we made that transition from RA to US? You know, if you were a volunteer, your serial number began with RA. And if you were drafted, it began with US. And we used to chide each other, you know, based on that, what your commitment was, based on what your number began with.
Sure.
You know, and then as they got rid of the draft, and we became what was then called VOLAR, Volunteer Army, you know, there was I don't know, sort of a change in the attitude, you know, amongst troops. But I don't know, when I was in, I felt my purpose was to defend the United States, you know, and what we believed and all that. But it just seemed like when I talked to those World War II guys, I mean, I felt like I wasn't as committed or wasn't as into it as they were. Although, I mean, my life was on the line as well, you know. I don't know, but...
Like one guy said, any time a bullet's flying near you or artillery over your head, it's war. They said they called Korea police action, and some guy said, well, if they think it's police action, send the police over here and send us home. You know?
And there was so much controversy, too, with regards to the Vietnam War. And I think that had a lot of impact on how...
Well, the country was behind World War II, if you go back and look at, you know, the news headlines and everything like that. People were really behind World War II, but when you got to Korea, the unknown war, you really got into a real controversial problem anyway. And then when we left there and went to Nam, then we really become controversial. What are we doing here anyway? So,
and all those started different. All those, World War II was a war. Korea was a conflict.
They called it a police action because war was never declared.
Right, exactly.
By Congress.
And Nam, we went in as advisors. Initially, that was our role. You know, so it was kind of convoluted, you know, as we...
It was.
Tell
us, Wayne, about your World War II book, where we can get the book at and things like that.
This is the book. It's only available at the museum. It has 65 stories of gentlemen and women that I interviewed in Wayne County. It has their story and their picture. The new book will be very similar. I'll show the cover of it soon. And then it has pictures and other supplemental stories and information. But it's a project for the museum. It's not something that anybody makes money off of. Any profits we get, we use to support our military displays. We're starting at the museum for Wayne County history and for future projects.
Did you write the book all yourself? Did you have help with it?
Yes, the first one. The first one I co-authored with a colleague, and then this one I did by myself. And it was published with a local publisher here, Augustin Printers. Did a fantastic job. I mean, they did as good a job as any major publisher could do with that book. So, and they've also doing the one on Korea and Vietnam.
Wow.
And these are available at the museum if a person wants to purchase one of those?
Right. They can call, or they can pick it up there, or whatever. So
it's amazing to me how well done it is, and some of the stories, and actually some of the World War II guys in there. Over my span of being in business in Richmond, I recognized the names. I didn't know them gentlemen personally, but a lot of them I recognized their names in the book. And it was really interesting to read some of their stories about how they did all that. So,
and you'll find the same thing with this book. Because,
it's but that's really something, and a credit to our community, that someone cares enough about veterans that they would pick up on that and go ahead and write something like this, because it is well done. It's really well done.
And I asked Al, I said, well, was he in the military? He said, no, he just had an interest and wanted to do this. Yeah.
Yes, I wasn't. I was in the Vietnam era. I was actually drafted, but I was deferred. They had special deferments for a while because I was in education. They had a shortage of teachers.
Yeah.
So, and then I signed a teaching contract. Well, the lottery went into effect then, and my number was down. But I've always had such high regard for the military with my father, and so I thought maybe this is some way I can give back since I didn't serve.
This is great.
Boy, that's fantastic. Then when we get on to Korea and Vietnam, those guys are, of course, that's drum beats pretty loud. Because those guys, the Korean guys, we have I don't know how many Korean guys we have.
There are 24 Korean veterans, and they were hard to find, believe it or not, because there were only 5 million of them compared to 16 million in World War II.
Wow.
And many of them served World War II and Korea, so they've passed. A lot of that
total
generation
number
is
was only 5 million?
Yes.
Is that right?
In Korea.
Wow.
Yeah. And but anyway, 24, I was able to find 24 in Wayne County and interview them, and 57 Vietnam veterans. So there's 81 stories in there from Wayne County. And then this is, that was the first book I did right there, and with my author. And this was the follow-up, and then this is the third one.
Now, I know you got Korea, Vietnam, Forgotten Warriors Against the Odds. Why did you use that subject?
That's a good question. I had thought about different kind of titles, and of course you come up and you think of Korea as the forgotten, the unknown war. That's commonly. Vietnam was called the unpopular war. I was interviewing a Vietnam veteran, and we were going back over ideas of titles, and he said, "Don't call it the unpopular war." He said, "What war is popular?" And it made me think. And about the politics of both those wars, as all wars have politics. Someone once said, and I believe it, politicians start them, young men fight them, and a lot of people get wealthy from them. And I have no trouble in saying that. But anyway, so from that standpoint, it was you know, a real connection for me, thinking that, gosh, these were the forgotten warriors because of the politics involved in Vietnam. We'd just come off World War II with Korea, you know, and so that was forgotten. But yet everybody served, and they tried to serve their country with honor, whatever role that was. So that's why it was the forgotten warriors, and they were against the odds in many ways.
Wow. Yeah, I remember when I was there, there was a lot of news going on within the ranks about the generals wanting to just go right ahead and spearhead Hanoi, but the politicians were arguing against it, and we're losing all these guys when we could have negated that, cut that real short, you know. So that caused even a sourness within the ranks.
Absolutely.
You know, and of course the people back home knowing all of this, and it just made it a very miserable situation for us. When we came home, and I don't know about you, but you didn't even want to wear your uniform.
And I had guys share their stories with that.
Actually,
too.
I didn't wear my uniform when I was going and coming. I never, because there was a time, and I think all military people feel that there's a time that you're proud that you're an American and you're doing something to help that cause. But in Vietnam, it kind of got to the point when you come home with a uniform, did you really want to wear that?
Right.
And I can remember changing quickly in
And it bothered me because
San Francisco.
Why get mad at us?
Yeah.
They should have just gotten mad at Washington and beat up on them.
What caused, let me ask a question that maybe I've just thought that, but what really caused all that tension and stress with guys in Nam versus the Korean guys versus the World War II guys? It seemed like the whole country was behind World War II, and everybody was happy. And all the men come home, but then when it got into Korea and Vietnam, was a totally different drain. It was like, what are you talking about, buddy?
Well, Hitler was a world threat.
Right.
I think that made a difference.
No question.
And the issue in Nam and Korea was they saw that more geographical.
Regional.
Regional, right. Now, it did have an indirect impact on us, economically for the most part, truth be known. So I think that played a big role in terms of the attitude and temperament, of the folk and the people that were serving.
Well, I think we lost so many people in Nam simply because the government was stamping the guys out. I mean, I was 18, not quite 19 years old. And there's a lot of guys in that 19, 20, 21 bracket. And you know as well as I do, you can't go through training and know enough about which end of the gun to use. And that's why I think we lost so many, that we just didn't have the time to train properly.
Right.
That's sad commentary.
I think another point too, and it brings up a good one, if you look at the time of the 60s, and that's when I was in high school as well, you had the Kennedy assassinations. Okay, you had the Martin Luther King assassination. You had the civil rights issue. So there was already that boiling, simmering protest type of anti-government, mentality. And the young people at that time, many of them just took up that charge, and unfortunately, our veterans, Vietnam veterans, who were just doing what they were asked to do, and many volunteered to serve their country, got the short end of it. And like you said, it wasn't their fault.
Right.
But they were the most visible figure, of it.
That's good. So, was there any, I think we kind of touched on it, common thread between all of them, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, common thread that seemed to run through all of them?
Yeah, and I would say proud to serve their country. If I had to say one thing, not that they didn't have different political positions and some of them some anger and bitterness, but they did what they had to do, and but the other big thing I think was the biggest was at times it wasn't even about Mom American apple pie. It was about the guy next to me.
That's right.
The guy behind me, the guy in front. Didn't make any difference what color his skin was, where he came from. We were a band of brothers.
Man, you hit on a very point dear to me. When I was there, I had to. We had to dig our home, and literally, I dug a hole the size of a grave. Is what I slept in. And me and this other fella, I was black, he was white. He was from the hills of Tennessee, and I came in from Michigan. And boy, you talking about differences in terms of
yeah, in the 60s.
In the 60s.
But we were hearing a lot of stuff, but we really never talked about that. It was our job to cover each other's back. And so I had to trust that he was going to be awake. And we were in the jungle there in An Khe. In the jungle, in the dark of night, you can't see anything. And when the moon comes up and it casts shadows on the trees, and the tree shadows look like people, and you're not sure what you're shooting at, you just shoot at whatever it looks like it's moving. But we had to trust each other, So all that stuff kind of went away. But I've heard a lot of guys say, yeah, I remember all that, but you know what? I saw some of those guys when we got back, and they reverted back to the same old stuff they were in before they got there. So the point is, though, when we're there, all that stuff went away.
Right. Well, and like I said, I think another thing I learned from of all of them, you can talk about war, you can see movies about it, you can see documentaries, but if you never experienced it, you can't truly understand it.
Yeah.
All the involvement, the nuances, the things that go on a day by day, from boredom to sheer terror.
Yeah. Wow. So now, have some of the guys that were in the book, have they read? They had a chance to read much of it?
Yeah, what I do, Ron, is when somebody has identified an interest, you know, and that they're willing to tell their story. And by the way, not one person refused to. I go and I sit down and interview. They share their story. I tell them it's their story. I don't probe and ask questions. Then I type up the story, mail it back to them in a few days. They do a final edit. So they have final say. So when that story's in that book, it's their story and they feel comfortable with it. And that's that. We started that with the first book, and it's been a successful approach to, I think, capturing oral history that's significant here for Wayne County.
Well, I think it was just what the 50th anniversary of NOM is when a lot of guys felt like that maybe the guys in NOM were getting the attention they deserved. I don't know as those wounds will ever heal, though, because of the way it was done, the way it took place. We didn't really have the government on our side. It was just me and you might say.
Yeah.
So that's
try
kind
not
of,
to.
that's profound. Way to think about it.
I guess I look at, you know, the fact that I'm here today and able to even talk about this, you know, and I have no problem asking for what I believe are legitimate benefits that we deserve as a result of our service. I don't think there ought to be a cap. I think there, you know, I had to run to Michigan this past weekend, and I saw a guy on the corner, and it said, veteran. He said, veteran, jobless, you know, and so you got to be careful, you know. So I called him over to the car. I said, what unit were you in, you know? And because, you know, you got to,
Sure.
He said 5th Corps, and then I questioned him, queried him
Right.
to see if he was really a veteran, and I believed that he was, and it just broke my heart, and I gave him what I had in my wallet. Wasn't much, but I gave it to him. But I told my wife, I said, it's a doggone shame that he's got to be here on this corner after he served his country like that.
What causes, you know, that's another question, which is just what causes people to have that circumstance? What causes that guy, if you will, to be homeless? What causes that mental problem? That becomes another problem. That the guys that had PTSD, and you know as well as I do, some of them in this community, that the government didn't take care of them. They didn't know what it was. So they just put a blanket on and said, who's this guy? You know, and that's really sad. And that guy could have been really suffering from PTSD and not even realize it. I mean, that's really sad.
That's the next book.
I think if I don't take a few years off, I'm not going to make my 48th wedding anniversary after 4 years of working on these. So.
Well, I think you've done a masterful job of it, the World War II. I'm anxious to see the Korean and Vietnam thing, and we want to talk about the book signing and when all that's going to take place. So do you want to give us all that information?
Yes, on April 12th, and
Okay.
of course there'll be information in the newspaper and so forth at the museum.
Okay.
We'll be having a public book signing and celebration from 1:30 to 3:30. We had a very successful program last year in attendance. We're in the process now of beginning to develop the 4 display cases for the Korean and Vietnam War.
Wow.
And it's 4 sections. We have Korea, Vietnam, the Richmond Connection, and then we have the Wall That Heals when it was here. And so it's going to be very nice. And then the veterans there can autograph stories of, you know, or I mean, autograph their story in the book. And
Wow.
And one of the things that really impressed me was the people who brought their children. I mean, they wanted them to meet these men and women.
Wow.
To see, you know, elementary kids and middle school kids
Sure.
and high school kids coming to honor and understand
Wow.
what they did.
That's interesting.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, I think it would go. It'd be a serious mistake for us not to educate and inform our young people so they realize the rich history of what the role that the veterans played and play in the stability of this country, you know, and
Right.
their ability to be able to go and come as they please, and
Right.
you know.
And you know, whatever one's politics are, I go back to a quote of Thomas Jefferson, and it's true in the past and it will continue to be. He said, you know, there are times throughout history when the tree of liberty must be watered by the death of patriots and tyrants.
Wow.
And that's so true.
Excellent closing comment.
Yeah.
Right on time.
Yeah.
Duane, thank you so much for coming. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Ron.
Enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, Duane Hodgin, author, World War II veterans of Wayne County, Indiana, and soon to be released Korea and Vietnam, Forgotten Warriors Against the Odds. Look for it. Go to the museum, pick it up. All right.
April the 12th
April
at
12th for
1:30
the signing at the museum.
at the
Yes.
museum.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, folks. We really appreciate you. Continue to support your veterans. Proudly we serve. Bye-bye.